When someone talks about a tank, the image that immediately comes to mind is a large, heavy, armored machine. But if you clicked on this video, you have probably already seen footage where the turrets of these fearsome vehicles are blown high into the air. It looks so unreal that many people think it is fake, exaggerated, or just a random accident. Yet the strangest part is that the cause was often not the power of the enemy shell, but the way the tank itself was designed inside. So why did engineers place ammunition in a way that allowed the machine to literally destroy itself? And could it have been avoided? To understand what actually blows the turret off, it helps to imagine what happens inside the vehicle after the armor is penetrated. The danger is not only from shell fragments or fire from a damaged engine. The worst case is when the ammunition ignites or detonates. Every tank carries from 30 to 60 rounds, depending on the model. Each of them contains powerful propellant charges based on gunpowder, nitroglycerin, or modern composite mixtures, as well as warheads filled with explosives. When the armor is penetrated, fragments or a shape-charged jet ignite the propellant, and in the enclosed hull, the pressure rises instantly to thousands of atmospheres within fractions of a second. The tank turret sits on the turret ring, a large circular ring with geared mechanisms on top of the hull that allows it to rotate 360 degrees, but it is not designed to withstand such extreme pressure. The result is that the turret is forced upward with enough power to lift 15 to 20 tons of steel to a height of 10 to 50 meters, and sometimes throw it dozens of meters to the side. That is why these scenes look so shocking. Military historians have estimated that in some conflicts up to 40% of destroyed tanks lost their turrets specifically because of ammunition detonation, not direct impact. At first glance, placing ammunition in the turret or directly beneath it seems like a foolish decision. But for the crew, it was critically important for shells to be as close to the gun as possible. The closer the ammunition, the faster the loading and the higher the rate of fire. In combat, seconds decide everything. A tank duel can last only 10 to 20 seconds, and the one who fires first and more accurately survives. If the loader has to run across half the vehicle and drag a 20-kilogram shell through narrow spaces, that tank loses to an opponent who keeps ammunition within reach. That is why in most World War II and Cold War tanks, part or all of the ammunition was stored in the turret, in side racks, along the walls, or even on the floor of the fighting compartment. In the Soviet T-34, for example, 77 rounds were distributed throughout the hull, but a significant portion was kept in the turret for quick access. The German Panther had shells in turret side racks, while the American Sherman initially stored them in sponsons and on the floor, allowing rates of fire of 6 to 8 rounds per minute. The problem was that tanks have almost no free internal space. Inside, engineers had to fit the gun, turret traverse mechanisms, engine, transmission, hundreds of liters of fuel, radio equipment, observation devices, ammunition, and still leave room for 3 to 4 crew members inside an armored box, only 2 to 2.5 meters high. If the ammunition was moved deep into the hull or into a separate isolated compartment, the tank became larger, heavier, and more expensive to produce. Engineers constantly balanced protection, weight, size, and firepower. Practicality often won. Better to have a fast tank with risks than a slow fortress that could be easily destroyed. Even in World War I, British Mark tanks stored ammunition in side sponsons directly beside the guns, and crews suffered from fires more often than from enemy shells. In World War II, American Sherman tanks initially lost up to 80% of vehicles because of the so-called cooking-off effect until wet stowage was introduced. Shells stored in containers filled with a water glycol mixture, reducing fire risk by 70 to 80%. But even that did not solve the problem completely. The difference in design philosophy became especially clear between the Soviet and Western schools of tank construction. Soviet tanks such as T-72, T-80, and T-90 became famous largely because of their autoloaders. In them, part of the ammunition load, usually 22 to 28 rounds of 125 mm caliber, was placed in a carousel directly beneath the turret at floor level of the fighting compartment. This allowed engineers to reduce the tank's silhouette to a minimum, remove the fourth crew member, the loader, and make the vehicle lower, cheaper, and more compact. The T-72 weighed only 41 tons compared to 60 to 70 tons for Western equivalents, while production cost far less. The autoloader provided a steady 6 to 8 rounds per minute, even while moving. But if an enemy shell penetrated the lower front hull plate or the underside, it could strike the carousel immediately. The consequences were catastrophic. Detonation of the entire carousel, and the pressure blasted the turret upward. Western tanks such as the American M1 Abrams, German Leopard 2, and British Challenger 2 chose another path. They stored most of the ammunition load, up to 36 to 40 rounds, in the rear turret bustle, separated from the crew by armored bulkheads and doors. This made the tank taller, but significantly safer. The M1 Abrams, for example, has a separate ammunition compartment where shells are stored horizontally rather than vertically in a carousel. The solution that truly saved crew lives appeared in Western designs: blowout panels. In modern tanks such as M1 Abrams or Leopard 2, if the ammunition in the bustle detonates, the energy is directed not into the fighting compartment, but outward through special panels on top of the turret. These panels are designed for a certain pressure and literally open like a valve, releasing the blast into the atmosphere. This does not make the tank invulnerable, but it increases the crew's chances of survival dramatically. According to American military data, during the Gulf War, crews of M1 Abrams tanks that were hit survived in 90% of cases, even when ammunition fires occurred. Why were older designs not rebuilt immediately if the problem was obvious? Many armies had thousands of tanks in storage. The Soviet Union produced over 50,000 T-72 and T-80 tanks. Completely changing the internal layout meant rebuilding factories, retraining crews, reorganizing spare parts logistics, and spending billions of dollars. Has the problem been solved today? Completely no. Any tank, if seriously penetrated by a modern-shaped charge round or kamikaze drone, can be destroyed. But modern active protection systems, such as Trophy on Israeli Merkava tanks, better ammunition isolation in separate compartments, fire sensors, and automatic powder suppression systems have greatly reduced the risks. In Western armies, M1 Abrams and Leopard 2 already use improved panels capable of withstanding the detonation of several shells at once. So turrets were not blown off because engineers were short-sighted. They were solving a different problem, making the tank lower, faster, cheaper, and easier to mass-produce. War revealed a brutal truth. Sometimes the most dangerous explosion was hidden not outside but inside the machine itself. And the placement of just a few dozen shells could decide the fate of an entire tank.